हाँ प्रवीण जी। अच्छा। हाँ हाँ हाँ। हम्म।
Perhaps it is a technical difficulty. He has not joined yet. Till we wait for some time for him.
मिस्टर अजीत कुमार सर। हेलो।
अभी अनम्यूट कर दिया. Right.
Ajit Kumar sir, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, sir. As I said that the next speaker is Mr. Ajit Kumar, and I said earlier, Mr. Ajit Kumar is a sustainable development worker, thinker, planner, integrator, speaker, communicator, motivator, and writer. He has been doing social work and practical research on sustainable development since the early 90s. He is a founder Khushi Gram and Vision 2030 for recreating and reviving happy village sites, cities, and communities. The background for the vision of Khushi Gram was prepared when he was in primary school in early 80s. As a journalist, social worker, speaker, writer, actor, director, leader, and member of the several local and national and global groups across sectors, he has been putting his best beat for a better, healthier, happier, harmonious, kinder, and peaceful world based on share and care, truth, trust, and transparency, and believe that together nothing is impossible. Very nice, sir. The topic for Mr. Ajit Kumar is restoring and reviving.
Yes, sure, starting. Yes. Sorry for the delay, first of all. Actually, I was caught in that Kisan rally that is happening in Delhi. You must all be aware of. So it is another challenge of sustainable development.
Sir, you are not audible.
Is it fine now?
Yeah.
Yes, now you are okay.
Good.
Yeah.
So I was actually caught up in the Kisan rally, which is happening in Delhi. All of you must be aware of, and it is another big challenge of mismanagement of our biodiversity and resources. So that is what is happening in Delhi right now, and we are all facing the challenge. So I was caught up for 2 hours, about 2 hours in the jam. So I was listening to you all in the car only. So the very excellent sessions. Previous speakers have spoken so well. There is not much that I can add on, but little bit of integration efforts that we are doing, I'll try to add. So basically, I'll tell a little bit about Khushi Gram, what we do and what is Khushi Gram, so that I can connect the dots. Basically, the activities that we offer in Khushi Gram are for Khushi, happiness. So, and happiness is not just physical, but also mental well-being, for an excellent family, social life, and along with the nature. Everything we do is with the nature. Wherever we are trying to suppress or push the nature in the negative direction, on the wrong direction, problems get created. So we are basically a collective of, we say, finest resources of the beautiful planet, because all of us are part of this. Even the flora and fauna are part of this. So we are trying to come together to make this planet beautiful for us by restoring and reviving biodiversity sustainably. Why we say sustainably? Because see, the challenge came that all of us had to come to the cities because of the because we are not able to find decent livelihoods in our villages or places closer to the nature or forest that we resided earlier. So so what we do is basically people from different walks of life, we have different specializations, because we need everything in a city or a village or in any habitat. So and we basically have to think of Mother Nature that we all are talking of today, and not only today, but the Sustainable Development Goals put a lot of focus on this. Before that, Millennium Development Goals that the target was to do many things till to 2015, which we are not able to achieve as much as we could have or we should have. So sustainable development now targets 2030 as the milestone time when we are able to achieve all the sustainable development goals. So 17 goals and 167 targets. When we fulfill the targets, the goals are believed to be achieved. So what we do is basically traditional values and modern approach. We try to combine all this together, and the rich Indian culture that we had, where we lived sustainably with nature. We took care of the animals and the plants. That's why till mid 18th century or early 19th century also, India had a lot of good forest, and our hills were very clean and rivers were very clean. In Delhi, our seniors who came to Delhi before us, they say that till 1960s, the river Yamuna water was drinkable. So were the forests and the habitats around, which were very clean. And so the clean air challenge that we have in Delhi, and also in the state Bihar, where the host college is and the university is, the Patna is one of the most polluted cities. Muzaffarpur is another very polluted city. So the pollution is not only in one place, but all the places. And this is because we lack biodiversity. We have cut our forests, cut our trees, and try to not only change our lifestyle, but we also have superimposed ourselves on the animals, and lot of non-vegetarianism is coming now these days to India. And in the West, many people are now turning vegetarian. So this is a very unique system where the West is trying to move towards Indian system or culture, and we are trying to move towards the West. So we have to desist from this. So the modern dreams and desires have to combine with the nature, with the natural habitat. So basically, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is what we say, do, and try to do. An integrated and sustainable living system, what we have to move towards. So I try to keep it as simple as possible, because we have very learned speakers and professors who have spoken so well, and they have given the technical details so well. So I won't go into that, because that is not my specialization nor my expertise. I'll talk how to do it. So basically, biodiversity is needed for living happy and healthy lives together. Together means all flora, fauna. We are part of the fauna, and we say that we are the most advanced animals, but we are still, and wisest lot, but we are still a part of the animal kingdom only. So that we have to understand, that we have to balance that. So the basic requirement, what is the basic requirement? Clean air, water, and food. And in modern times, whenever we talk to any friend or any colleague or anywhere, people will say that money is the most important thing. Money is just a means, not the goal. So this we have to understand and internalize in our minds. It has to be very clear, because till it is clear, we won't be able to live sustainable lives. So clean air, water, and food, these are the three most important things in the same order. We have to understand this. Now, how to balance clean water, air, and food? Clean air, water, and food, because we have to, so for that we have to see that we don't cut the trees, rather we plant the trees. We revive the water bodies, not pollute the water bodies. We don't pollute the hills. Nowadays, a lot of tourism, unsustainable tourism. So we have to move towards sustainable tourism, where we don't put plastics and other garbage on the hills and forests, and where flora and fauna face a lot of challenges due to these activities of humans. So we have to live with the cohabitants. We have to be very clear. अकेले नहीं जीना है हम लोग को, हमको सबके साथ जीना है. पेड़ पौधे, इंसान, जानवर, सबके साथ जीना है, सबके साथ मिलके जीना है, सबका ख्याल रखना है. पहले मैं एग्जांपल देता हूं इसका, फिर उसके बाद आगे बढ़ते हैं. पहले हम लोग जब भी खाना बनता था, तो सबसे पहले हम गाय को देते थे. तो सबसे आखिरी खाना हम अपने कुत्ते या जो बाकी जानवर है पालतू आसपास रहते थे, उनको हम देते थे. और बीच में हम लोग खाते थे, और उसमें भी जो घर का मुखिया होता था, सबसे लास्ट में खाता था. The head of the family, because there are a lot of people who don't understand Hindi also. So the head of the family used to have food in the end. Before that, he used to give to the cow. Cow was considered our mother, because cow not only gives us milk, but healthy food, and healthy food, which sometimes some mothers were not some mothers were not able to uh, 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 give sufficient food or milk to the children. So that in those cases also, we got milk from our cows, and these were indigenous Indian cows, the desi cows or A2 cows that we say. So that was the balance that we had. The dogs and the pet animals that we had around, they not only kept us alert but safe also. They saved us also from lot of other threats or animals or other problems. So these were the key challenges that we had, and due to these problems, we used to due to this way of life, we had to we had to have or rather we were the richest in the world, not only in terms of environment and sustainable development, but also in terms of money, or what they now call it GDP, the calculations that we have. So it is not that money doesn't come with nature. Money comes with nature only, actually. In the short run or medium run, we might overrun the nature and then try to create many unsustainable practices, and we might earn some money, but it won't be sustainable. Not for ourselves, not for our children or coming generations. And once the environment is damaged beyond a point, it's very difficult to reverse or revive it. So that's why my topic and the in fact the conference is focusing on biodiversity, and that's why we are focusing on reviving and restoring. So we need to revive and restore. This is the high time, because the climate change impacts are visible everywhere. The weather changes, the climate changes, the temperature changes, loss of biodiversity, loss of lot of farm produce that we are trying to cultivate, and a lot of farm produce get damaged. So all these were balanced. Wherever we had, say, insects, we didn't have so many pests that damaged our crops. So now we are putting pesticides and chemicals. So once you put pesticides and chemicals, lot of healthy microbes, especially the earthworms, get damaged. And earthworms are the main workers for our plants or our farms or even our trees. That's why in forests we didn't have to cultivate trees or plants. They grow themselves and they thrive themselves, and they thrive for hundreds of years. And the branches are much bigger than we can have in the, say, villages or cities. We have even smaller plants and trees, and for lesser time. So balancing is very important. That is what we wanted to focus on. The other important needs. So the clean air, because the polluted air, we have a lot of respiratory challenges in the big cities and other cities, and even the smaller towns are now facing a lot of challenges. So the first I think the first speaker spoke about eco-friendly industrialization. That is the key, actually. That is the way we can balance. So our water bodies can be clean. We can drink water from our ponds also, that we used to do till 2-3 decades back in most of the villages. So this is very clear we have to do. And then the clean food, the organic food also. I think during the inaugural session also, the learned speakers spoke about the organic food. So we need to have our food organic. We need to go back to that. Actually, our food was already organic or natural till last 2, 3, 4 decades, till the time we started using a lot of pesticides and chemical pesticides, chemical fertilizers, chemical insecticides, which damaged our crops and damaged our lives. So cancer came to our lives. Our BP fluctuated, so low BP, high BP. Our heart challenges came up. So all these health issues came up because of bad food habits, unclean air, and say polluted water. So all these challenges are closely correlated. So I don't need to speak much. I think our speaker is waiting for. I'll take just 4 minutes now, to complete before 12:30. The other important needs are habitat, health, livelihood, education, and entertainment. Entertainment, because at the end of the day, when we are tired, we need some kind of entertainment. So we can have very good entertainment in and around the farms, in and around biodiversity. We can have farm tourism, eco-tourism, agri-tourism, hill tourism, water rafting. A lot of things are there, but we need to balance it. It should not be exhaustive. We should not exhaust the resources. We should balance it. We should not have millions of people at one go. We should have few thousand or few hundred as per the environment that can sustain that. So that is there. And then habitat, we can create our houses and homes, eco-friendly houses and homes with eco-friendly materials. with waste materials, and we can reuse things. So reviving, recreating, reviving, rethinking, reusing, and extending life cycle of the products. The products that we used till 1 or 2 decades or 3 decades back had a long life cycle. Now we change the products in 1 or 2 years. We change our mobile phones in 1 or 2 years. We have to desist from that. We have to stop that, avoid that. We need to have products that are sustainable and for longer times. We use a lot of machines. Instead of machine, we can dry our clothes in the sun. That was our Indian system was. That was our parampara. So, and in the livelihoods should also be connected to biodiversity. We should focus more on primary and secondary instead of tertiary. Tertiary should be for basic necessities. Most important things should be done in the tertiary mode, but we should be closely connected to the family. So food processing, agriculture, education also on the farms. So once children stay on the farms, the gurukuls were there in farms, so children understand and appreciate more about the farms, the importance of biodiversity. So we need to connect, we connect the dots, we connect schools and colleges to farms, to livelihood, to forest, and we need to train them, because the gurukuls of India, which were in the past, the education centers in the past, were in the forests, and children learned everything, how to create water bodies, how to maintain and sustain water bodies, how to maintain trees, how to give respect to the trees and environment. That was what, that is what our prayers were. There is a festival Chhat. Most people from Bihar and Eastern UP and Jharkhand must be knowing, and now I think most people outside also know. In Delhi also we celebrate Chhat. In Chhat we pray to sun god, not only the sun god that is rising, but the sun god that is sun god in the evening also. We pray to that. So we pray to nature because we sustain nature, and Chhat is a festival where we clean our rivers and water bodies. So all these are very connected. I spoke about habitat, health, livelihood also, and entertainment also. In entertainment, we have very good cultural and classical arts and folk arts. Why don't we revive that? Why don't we do that? Why are we just looking at films as source of entertainment? So we have to look at all these. So we have to, in the short run, we have to try and reduce our waste, and in the long run, we have to go and move towards zero waste. So that is what I had to say. I think my time is almost over. So we have to go back to these things, and we need to connect more. So connect with the R&D institutions, schools, colleges, universities, and every city should have few integrated sustainable living models. So it can be zoological park, botanical parks, or mix of both, and where people live sustainably, and industry also, small enterprises thrive sustainably. This is all I had to speak. Thanks a lot. And we are willing to partner in whatever way we can. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you again. You have delivered several aspects in the sustainable development. We will be benefited for your kind lecture. Thank you again, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Professor Harini Nagendran. Madam Harini Nagendran, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. Welcome, madam.
Thank you.
Professor Harini Nagendran is a professor of sustainability at the School of Development, PS Institute of Technology, Ajimi, Premji University, Bangalore. You are an ecologist who uses methods from the natural and social sciences, satellite remote sensing, biodiversity studies, archival research, GIS, institutional analysis, and community interviews to examine the sustainability of forests and cities in the global south. You are recipient of numerous awards for your research activities. Very popular 2 books authored by you, and over 150 peer-reviewed publications, including in Nature, Sustainability and Science. You have a recent book, Nature in the City, Bangalore in the Past, Present and Future, was listed by the science journal Nature as one of the 5 best science picks of the week in its issue of July 28, 2016. The topic of Professor Harini Nagendran is Urbanization, a New Frontier for Conservation. Madam, please.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me just, I think you need to enable my screen sharing.
Okay, sure.
It is done? Yes. You can see this?
Yeah.
So thank you once again for this invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here and to talk to everybody about urbanization and why urbanization is an important frontier for conservation, especially in India. So this, I'll start straight away because I want to see if we can leave some time for question and answers. And I have a lot of ground to cover. So by 2050, we will be a world that is 75% urban. We're already more than 50% urban. And we know that when we look at school textbooks, we were all taught that India is a largely rural country, and that is still largely true. But India, China, Nigeria are the three fastest urbanizing countries in the world now. This is the UN map, and you will see the red and the yellow are the fastest growing cities, and you will see that the fastest growing cities are in new regions of the world, are in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. They are not in the areas that when we think of cities, if you close your eyes, you might think of New York or Paris or Hong Kong or Japan. Those are not kinds of cities that will be the cities of the future. The future cities are Indian cities, Chinese cities, African cities. You know, they are the ones that are growing very fast. This is another map that shows you the same kind of data in a very different way. It's a satellite nightlights map of satellites of the world. And what it is trying to show you here is how there are differences between areas where lights go on, that is rapidly urbanizing areas, and areas where lights go off. Because who leaves lights on at night? Only people in cities. And you'll see that India is largely lit up. Let's give you another zoom in, just to give you a comparison between the US, where you have a lot of work on urban conservation, and India. You'll see that India and South Asia as a whole is in a place of rapidly expanding blue lights. That is, new lights are turning on between 2012 and 16. The US is a place where lights are turning off, especially this part. This is an area of the Southeast Texas and those areas which are de-urbanizing. Factories are shutting down. There is a loss of industrial jobs. These are places where there is de-urbanization and shrinking cities. If you look at similarly at Europe, there's a lot of shrinkage in cities. The reason I'm saying this, urbanization in the global south context, which is a very different context from urbanization in the global north or the developed countries, which is where most of the research has come from so far. We have growing cities, we have a culture of living with greenery, we have extremely high population densities. Our context.
Vijay.
Just others to go on mute because there is some back feed coming. Somebody is on speaking. Can somebody, whoever it is, can you please go on mute?
Yeah, madam.
Can you please go on mute? I can hear the feedback.
एक मिनट. Hello.
Yeah, thank you. So where is the data coming from? Now, if you look at, we did a study of the top 1,000 papers on urban sustainability over the 10-year period. And this is important because we need to know if we were to look at Indian cities for conservation, where is our data coming from? Now, if you look at urban sustainability, of course, which is a larger field than conservation, but a lot of it is on biodiversity, you find that papers from India are 0.1% of the top cited papers. Most of them between North America, Europe, in fact, 70% of all the papers come from North America and Europe. Now, why is this important? Because the situation in the global south is very different, or developing countries is different. If you look at the green bars, you will see that that is population growth in developing countries. It has always been higher than population growth in developed countries. So we face urban population growth. This is a particular problem that we have had from the 1970s onwards. We have had faster growing cities and denser cities. Our cities have very different ecological and social and environmental parameters. So different levels of city prosperity, of infrastructure development, of quality of life, of environmental sustainability. If you break that further up, and this is all UN data, the blue is developed countries, North America, Europe, Australia, Japan. And for us, what is relevant is pink, which is Asia. So if you compare the blue and the pink, you'll see we have high youth unemployment, high under 5 mortality, high rates of PM10 concentration, so high rates of air pollution, very low rates of internet access, very low rates of access to good water. All of this are parameters that shape not just the society of our cities, but also the ecology of our cities. Why is this important? This is important because the research is very influenced by other research. We always stand on the shoulders of giants, as we say. And when we are standing on the shoulders of other researchers whose papers come from the US and European context, we are not doing research that is valid to Indian context. And I want to give you 3 reasons why. Urban theory currently of urban ecology is driven by the North. That shapes methods that are fit to a northern city context, and that influences practice, planning, and design of our cities. I'll give you 3 examples of where this can go wrong. For the first one, for instance, we look at number of urban lake restorations. Across India, this is going on, and this is very fueled by ideas of smart cities and nature-based services and recreation. So this is an example of a polluted lake in Bangalore, which was drained and made into a restored lake. What are the kinds of interactions that people have around these kinds of ecosystems in India? And these are all photographs from Bangalore, but they could be from anywhere else. We have sacred services. You can see the gentleman above praying to trees. We have grazing. We have children who hang saris on trees and swing from them and play that. Those are their play areas where they don't have gyms and play parks. You have dhobi ghats. You have low-income women living in slums who live next to lakes and collect all kinds of wild weeds from them. Yet, when we restore these lakes, what do? We exclude all these commons uses, community uses. We throw out the grazers, we throw out the women who are foraging, we throw out the dhobis, we throw out the fishermen. This is bad for ecology. Why is it bad for ecology? Typically, what you do in a grazing in a lake which has grazing, for instance, is you want Bangalore to be Singapore. These are images from an actual protest around lakes in Bangalore, where people were arguing that they want Bangalore to become Singapore. It's ironic. Our vision of our cities are tall skyscrapers. That's what we think Singapore is. Singapore, meantime, has moved from saying that they are a garden city to a city within a garden. Now their planning documents say they're a city embedded inside an entire ecosystem. That is, they are thinking of an ecosystem approach. We are thinking of skyscrapers. This is the kind of typical restored lake. So if I go back to these photos, look at the way lakes used to be. And this is, you just drive outside any city, you will still see lakes like this. And this is the example of a typical restored lake. Why is this bad? This is bad socially and this is bad ecologically. It is poor design because it draws on concepts that don't work here. What are the concepts? Let's look at them. First thing you do is there will be polluted water. And in India, any water body is no longer rain-fed in cities. It will also have a certain amount of sewage. The approach is to have then either one of 2 things. One is you divert the sewage. If you divert the sewage, you divert the rainwater. The lake goes dry. So you do an expensive restoration. 5 years later, you have a dry lake. Again, you do another expensive restoration project. Of course, the people involved, the contractors, the government officials, there's an endless income stream, but you don't get good restored bodies. Or you treat it in a sewage treatment plant, which is electricity intensive, carbon intensive, and costs a lot of money. Often the state does not have money to maintain it. That fails. But even if it's working, that sewage treatment plant will send in enriched water, which has nitrogen and phosphorus. It takes out the sewage. It doesn't take out the nitrogen and phosphorus. What happens then? You get a lot of growth. If you're lucky, you get grass like this. Most often you get exotic water weeds, typha and other kinds of weeds. Right? I mean, this is typha grass, but you might get these invasive weeds, right? Salvia and other kinds. Now, what happens if you have cows? Cows are a very natural way to harvest this biomass. And cows also mean that you have organic milk then of this kind feeding the city, and you're increasing the nutrition, you're increasing the livelihoods of the poor, and you're maintaining a certain biodiversity, because there are bird species that are co-evolved to live in these marshy areas and breed with them with cows. The second reason, for instance, the other thing we do is we remove fishermen. But in these areas, typically it is at night that all the bad activities happen, the dumping of solid waste, the letting diversion of industrial waste, effluents, the apartments that pump sewage, all of this happens at night. Who's there at night to watch? No security guards, no resident welfare associations. It's the fishermen who are there, who sleep at night there to protect their fish. So this is something we have seen through personal experience, I'm saying. That when we work with communities who are involved in lake restoration in Bangalore, the fishermen have been their best allies in protecting the lake. However, again, this theory of lake restoration says these are all unsanitary uses. Take out the fishermen, take out the grazers. It's not just bad ecologically, it's bad socially, but it's an idea that comes from a very Western system of sewage treatment plants and a lake restoration that is based around ideas of recreation, purely recreation. Right? That's my first example of why we need more research that is Indian embedded. A second example is understanding how people get together in environmental movements, because a lot of restoration work happens in cities, not because of governments, not because of corporates, but because of citizen movements. And this is something that we have seen growing in India today across all cities. What we find is, it is not, you need to understand what are the contexts under which people will come together. Cities are full of migrants like the migrant workers above. Cities are also full of village residents like the lady below, and the city has swallowed her village. So we call her a slum dweller now, but actually she's one of the original residents with a heritage of several hundred years of maintaining the lake, because her forefathers, her ancestors were the ones who maintained the lake. Why would these kinds of communities come together to restore the lake? We find so many. We have done work with another sociologist colleague of mine, Amrita Rao. We find migrant workers, village residents, transgender communities, parents of special need children, grandparents, many. So we find a lot of women involved in spearheading lake restoration, and most of them are mothers who come together. Why are they coming together? Most of these are new migrants into this area. However, a restored lake gives them some sense of their past. They came from somewhere where they had a relationship to nature. So an elderly gentleman from Andhra Pradesh told us that he saw neem trees, and the neem tree reminded him of his place, and so he started working there. Another person told us that he retired and moved from the Assam barrage area, and he saw migratory cranes there, and he came here and saw the same migratory cranes, and he felt like it was home. There is another woman who has a mother of a special needs child, said that she comes every morning to the lake because her child lets off steam, and he does a lot. He runs around and plays, after which he's very calm in his school, and he's happy and she's happy. Transgender people told us that when they want to sit anywhere in the city, the police chase them away. But in the lake, they feel the lake does not judge them. They sit and look at the landscape. IT workers told us that they come every day for their tea. They bring a flask and sit for an hour at the lake to refresh themselves before they plunge back into their complete concrete cave, and they have to stay till 9 o'clock every day. So they are only able to keep some mental health and stress relief because they emerge for an hour every day and sit at the lake. Right? So all of these give us a sense of the idea that a gym or a mall or any building in a city will not stimulate you to feel that sense of place. If a migrant person who moves to a city has to get themselves involved in lake restoration or any environmental activism, they will do so only when they forge a connection to that city, when they feel that that city is not their temporary home, but it's their permanent home. It is their city, and therefore it's something to fight for. When does that happen? That only happens when they see a place of nature that they form that connection with. And this is something our research, like I said, we have been doing this in multiple lakes. This is becoming very clear. Again, this is not research that you will find in most areas. Most research on urban environmentalism is from a European or American context, and we don't understand fully what drives it in contexts like ours. The third is an example that, again, from my research, which tells you why methods that we use are not the correct methods to use. So often, most urban ecology is done with the idea of urban transects to assess a gradient of urbanization. You start in the middle, you go to the end. I'll give you an example from Bangalore, which again could be an example from Delhi or Mumbai or anywhere, where you could talk about villages in the city. Just like you can go out to a rural area and find a very wealthy neighborhood that looks like an urban area right in the middle with fields all around. Similarly, you can come to the heart of the city and find extremely village-like environment, like the Lal Doras in Delhi, for instance. So these are 6 neighborhoods we took in Bangalore, and you can see the 6 neighborhoods, the pink squares. And these are examples of how they have shaped from 1880s to 2013. These are some of Bangalore's oldest neighborhoods. An example from Domlur. It's the heart of the city. It's one of the oldest areas. In fact, it has one of the oldest temples with inscriptions that dates from the 13th century AD. Right? Look at this neighborhood. You have very tall skyscrapers. You have one of the most affluent golf clubs in here. You have the Leela Galleria Palace, which is a 5-star hotel here. And right next to it, you have cow sheds. And you have this kind of an environment where cows are free grazing and people are doing urban agriculture. This is the oldest part of the city, Avenue Road. In the heart of Avenue Road, you have a sacred temple, a ficus grove, and you can see the biodiversity here will be very different. Similarly, these are old areas in Malleshwaram with large sacred trees, very different biodiversity from the tall buildings and skyscrapers outside. So a gradient or a transect approach would fail in this context because you will be going from patches. Let's take the Domlur example. You will be going from an extremely high-end place, the golf course, Leela Galleria, Leela Palace, all the way to that hut that I showed you. It's not a gradient or a transect. It is pockets of rurality within urbanity, pockets of urbanity within rurality. And yet, this is our dominant way of doing any urban ecology research, a gradient or a transect approach. It does not work in the Indian context. It does not work in the African context. It does not work in the Latin American context. But yet all researchers will use it in all of these places because our theories come from Western context, right? So this is not a story of one city alone. When I speak to colleagues working in Africa, working in Latin America, working in other parts of Asia, we all find that there's this commonality that we have incomplete theorization, inappropriate methods, and therefore we have ill-designed plans that do not work in our city. Right? So this is the first half of my presentation. In the second half, I want to show you what is the way forward. How can we actually work with our urban research? Because I feel like if we do urban research on conservation, we have, because there is such little research and so many environmental and ecological problems in Indian cities, we have an imperative that we must feed our research into planning. If we don't do that, then we are failing in our entire task because cities are degrading all around us. So much more than, often we work in distant forest areas, we are not embedded there. Most of us live in the cities where we work. So we really have to work to get our research streamlined into planning. And I'll give you again 3 examples of possible ways in which we have done this. This is by no means exhaustive. There are many other people who are doing very good research in multiple Indian cities. I'm just speaking from personal experience and I'm happy to share other people's work also later. So the first is the idea of the importance of street trees. Now, street trees are the most threatened of all ecology in any city in India. The first thing we are doing across India, widening our roads, widening them for flyovers, underpasses, signal-free corridors, more traffic, more private traffic, metro, bus, rapid transport, whatever you call it, we are widening the roads. And to widen the roads, we never maintain the street trees. The first thing we do is we cut the street trees. We are seeing lakhs of street trees that have gone in Bangalore itself. Then you look at the Salem to Pondicherry corridor. You can look at the Delhi, what's been happening is street tree felling. You can look at Mumbai to Pune. Street trees are threatened across the country. And most importantly, when governments say that, always you will find the municipality making a claim that I will cut a tree, I will plant 10 trees. Those 10 trees will not be planted back on the same street that they were cut. They are being removed from streets. So we started talking a lot about the importance of street trees for ecology. And at one point, we realized that nobody was listening to us sufficiently because we were making arguments about ecology. But the planners were saying, this is not my imperative. Traffic is my imperative. You can have trees outside the city. How do we convince them? We have always tried to link research with education. And so a lot of our research has been with undergraduate and master's students. So one of the undergraduate students we were working with Lionel Sujal Vaisheri, came up with a very good idea saying everybody is interested in health. So let us look at the impact of street trees on the environment, pollution, and health. We did a study in collaboration with two environmental sciences colleges in Bangalore, Mount Carmel's and St. Joseph's College, where we looked at how trees are important in reducing pollution and heat. And we took this method, like you have one street with trees and without trees. In the same section of the street, you will have some parts with trees and some areas without trees. So we took one stretch of road with trees, one stretch of road without trees, and we had two study teams. At the same time, they were monitoring pollution and heat in the section without trees, in the section with trees. So it's the same day, the same traffic, the same wind, the same other conditions. The only difference is trees. It gives you a very good paired sample. Now, what's the first result we found? The suspended particulate matter, the soot in the air. And this, all you do is you take an air filter like this and you suck the air through it for 8 hours. And then you wash off this and measure it. So here's just a visual with trees and without trees. You can see without trees, that filter is black, and this is how our lungs must be looking. With trees, it comes down to light gray. Here is a quantitative graph of the same thing. And if you can look at the black dot, essentially what it says is that once you have, so suspended particulate matter in roads, for instance, where I live, can be 4 times the permissible limit. As soon as you have trees, it comes to within permissible limits. It's a very simple act of planting trees. The leaves are hairy and they absorb the soot and they hold it for some time till the next rainfall, at which point it gets washed away and deposited on the ground. So having trees on roads will really help in cutting your air pollution. Delhi does not need to, or Bangalore does not need to have its smoke scrubbers packs. Of course, you need other measures. Just trees will not be enough, but trees help tremendously. And we are cutting trees on roads rather than planting trees on roads. Sulfur dioxide is another very important air pollutant. Sulfur dioxide levels also come down substantially. Air temperatures, we all know that we get summer heat waves and that is going to increase under climate change. Air temperatures come down by 3 to 5 degrees. This is a very important finding. We also measured the surface temperature of the tar, the asphalt. You can use infrared thermometers and measure the surface temperature. What we find is that that temperature reduces by 25 degrees. So let us assume that you're standing in a hot day on the road in a Bangalore weather, Bangalore sun, which is not your Delhi sun. Even then, you will have 65 to 68 degrees surface temperature of the asphalt. 65 to 68 degrees. Once you move under the shade of the tree, it becomes 35 degrees. Why is this important? Because when you're walking on the road, it's not just the what we call ambient air temperature that we record, which is the temperature at your face level. It is that heat that reflects off the road that makes it very difficult for you to walk. That heat is hitting you like a heat wave. You get disoriented, you get dizzy, you get heat strokes. Nobody will use the bus, nobody will use the cycle, nobody will walk. There are reports in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, a couple of small towns, in fact, have had tar melting on them in 2017 during an extreme heat wave. And we know that what was extreme in 2017 will become common in 2030-40. If we have entire cities with tar melting, imagine a city with no motorable roads. What would happen? Chaos would ensue. So the simple act of planting a tree that can reduce temperature by 25 degrees centigrade is an extremely important thing. Yet none of the cities, there are some cities that have excellent heat action plans like Ahmedabad, and they have significantly reduced deaths from heat waves. But they largely function by things like painting roofs white and doing SMS alert systems to tell people that it is hot and they should get into cool areas, and finding cool buildings for them to get into. Instead of that, if you had focused also of planting trees and restoring your lakes and water bodies, that has to be done in conjunction with all of these other approaches. Otherwise, what we are doing now will not suffice in 2030, 40, and 50, because projections state that a combination of urban heat islands and climate change will make our cities 5 to 10 degrees hotter in a few decades. 5 to 10 degrees hotter. That means many North Indian cities will not be livable. And in many South Indian cities, death rates will go up hugely because humidity plus heat is a big killer. Right? So we have to start planning for the future, and street trees are very important. Now, this research turned out to be very important, like I said, locally embedded, because this was, I would say, if I look back at our 15, 16 years of research, this is the one report that has connected to people directly, because you're not giving them other See, when you talk about biodiversity or emotional connects to trees, people who are naturally nature lovers will understand it. But this reaches everybody, even the worst skeptic. Everybody understands health. Right? So this is one example of locally embedded research. Another example is very recent work we've been doing on urban design for biodiversity. And there's been very little work on what makes birds survive in the city. So we did a global study of 232 papers across the world looking at bird traits, behavior, breeding, physiology, and feeding. As you can see from this map with the red dots, most of these studies, very few of them are in India. Most of them are in Australia, America, and Europe. And so the problems that I talked to you about are very true here. But it is a global review. So we are dealing with what we have. And they're in temperate countries which do not necessarily apply to the Indian context. But when we don't have studies, this is what we have to come to. What do we find in this? We find there are a number of studies. Most of these species you will see are not species that we see here, nor are they analogous, but they get some ideas of the kinds of traits that people study. For instance, song structure. There is a lot of research that shows that when cities have a lot of traffic, that traffic is at a very low base level. You have a very low frequency sounds. And birds need to make themselves heard above that. So they start trilling in very high frequencies. This is evolutionarily costly behavior. And so you find on weekends and on holidays, the trills come back to normal frequencies. On noisy days and days of full traffic, working days, the trills go up to high frequencies. What can this tell us? Because it's a costly structure, we can say that lakes, for instance, or parks, you must line them with high trees or high bushes. For instance, Millingtonia, plant Millingtonia, or plant any of these other kinds of tall and fast-growing trees that will protect from the noise, so that birds inside these areas can be quieter and can have less costly behavior. Another thing you find is reproductive and physiological studies, and all of them substantially show that because breeding in the city is a very risky process, and because of feral dogs and cats and rats, you have a lot of nest predation, especially for ground dwelling and mid-level trees, mid-level birds. Most birds are reproducing early, that is their hormonal changes, so they start reproducing early, and they have much larger clutch and brood sizes. So that there's a chance game they're playing. If some of the eggs are eaten or some of the chicks are eaten, at least they have some others. Now, this obviously means they cannot invest enough on the brood, and the brood has a weakness in terms of each individual chick will not get that much nutrition. What can we do? There are definitely ways that we can think of. If you can't do this across the city, but in specific areas, let's say parks and lakes and high biodiversity areas, can you design nest boxes? Can you help in reducing nest predation there so that you make sure that cats and feral dogs, stray dogs don't get access to these places? Can you provide extra food resources so that if in breeding seasons, especially high breeding seasons, then some of these birds have a higher chance of success? So there's much from this research that we can learn from and use this to redesign our cities. In fact, we are having a webinar now. This is very new research. But on 20th March, which is World Sparrows Day, we will hold a webinar along with certain other bird experts at IeSB University. It will be online to look at what kind of implications does this have and other things from the breeding bird survey in India to understand how we can better design our cities. This is my second example. My third example is on why we need to rewild the city. We rarely think of cities as places of food systems, and yet food is a very important part of biodiversity. In traditional contexts, we didn't always only grow our food or bring them from outside the city, ship them from New Zealand and have apples wrapped in plastic or zucchini from somewhere else wrapped in plastic and sold in Godrej Nature's Basket or Reliance store, right? We bought them from local markets. And often this was not grown, but foraged for from wild weeds. So if you speak to any of your parents, grandparents' generation, we now maybe eat 5-6 greens, and they probably ate 70 or 80 greens. So we did a study, again very recent, where we looked at how much foraging again goes on. And this is experiential. We had seen through our research, women collecting all kinds of greens, like the image that I showed you at the lake. And whenever we talked to planners, they said, this is Bangalore city. It's a modern city. People will not be collecting. People don't graze in the city in their imagination. People don't fish in the city in their imagination. And people do not collect wild plants in their imagination. So it has to be nature designed as a recreational spot, as a nice landscape lake, or as a nice place with benches and ornamental plants and an ornamental garden, which, like I said, is bad for society, bad for ecology. So we started looking at foraging sites, and we looked at the number of people. We interviewed 200 women from low-income households from the city center and the city edge. And we found that many of them collect from open land, park areas, as well as farmland villages. These are very rare produce. There are 80 different species. 200 households, we got close to 80 species, 76 species that they knew, many of them which we don't use. And they know that this is used for jaundice, that is used for bad knees, this is used for a child to improve brain power. There are markets. So in the heart of the city, there is no place to collect anymore. What people have done is a way around it. There are markets in the city where you can go and tell these women that you want this sopu, this green or that green, and they will collect it for you. You come back next week and they will supply it for you. So they are still keeping their memory alive, even though these weeds are not available. And so this is another example. Now what we're trying to do is work with some of the park authorities. So what we found is many of the women who are the cleaners and sweepers in the park also forage for wild weeds. Now, why should it not be possible for us to have them doing workshops for people like us? So you can go into the park, and instead of only having a naturalist who takes you around and shows you birds, a woman of this kind would take you around. She would be the expert showing you where to forage for wild weeds. And some parts of the park would just be left alone as a wild weed paradise. There are people, there is another artist that works close by in Sarjapura, which is a peri-urban village. And his name is Suresh, and he's been working with women in this area during the COVID time when they have lost jobs for lockdown, to regain this consciousness of wild weeds and supply them to people in the city. So just like you have an organic store that you might have a weekly basket from, these women will pick wild weeds, and not only that, you will get by WhatsApp some recipes of how to cook them and what they're good for. Again, preserving the idea of rewilding the city, but also getting incomes from this. So these are my 3 examples. These all are very locally embedded pieces of research. They tell us how people interact with nature. So street trees, why are the birds in the city, and then this rare produce. Looking at these 3 as examples, we can see the world is so open for the kinds of urban research that we can do. All of this is very low cost. Much of this is done with students and interns. And the kind of results we have had in terms of engaging with local communities is huge. Again, there are many other researchers who are slowly growing. I used to go to the student conference in conservation science, SCCS, which is held every year in Bangalore, for the past 13, 14 years. Originally, there were barely any people doing urban ecology. And now I find at least 30% of the students who come in and the young people who are coming in are doing urban ecology. So I think this is a really great and growing area. And this is something we all need to invest in, because we still have only research really coming in from the large cities. The one gap area that I see is there's barely any research on the small cities and tier 2 and 3 cities, and then the smaller towns in India. And those are the areas where the ecology, there is much more hope. In a place like Bangalore, there is far less hope than in a place like Mysore or even, let's say, Bidar, because those are the places where nature is still largely intact. So we need much more research of this kind. And as I said, it's very low cost and very easy to do. I'll end with this, that urbanization is a new frontier for conservation. This is great artwork by a student intern who worked with us, Rohit Rao, on the urban foraging work. And you can see this beautiful imagination of a city that I would just like to leave with. It does not have to be Singapore. We should have our cities like our cities with this rich diversity, which is good, as I said, good for ecology and good for people. With that, I'll end. Thank you so much, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, the interactions, 2 questions from audience to ma'am. Any interaction from audience?
Good afternoon, ma'am. I have a query. What is the way to encourage and aware people towards biodiversity? Because we feel that many educated people are unaware of this problem. They are not very keen to keep their surrounding clean and balance with ecology. So, in one line, what is the way, ma'am? I mean, we want to hear a punchline from you.
That is, you have put your finger on the most important challenge we have been struggling with, and I think everybody struggles with in the city, because many people, as you say, do not understand the importance of biodiversity for their daily lives. What is the most effective way that we have found is really education, education, education. And that is something that has to be done in the very long-term broadcasting kind of approach. So we do a lot of work with students. You know, if you find, if you train students, that I think has been the most multiplicative. So a lot of our writing, for instance, the book that I wrote with my colleague, Cities and Canopies, which is trying to simplify the idea of trees and connect that to everybody's everyday life. We did not expect that so many people would read it, but from 10-year-olds to 90-year-olds, we have had people coming back to us and saying that they have not just read it, but the 10-year-olds are saying that they have seen changes in their lifetime of the loss of trees. They are grieving that they have seen these changes in their lifetime, which for us was quite dramatic. You do not expect a 10-year-old to say something like that. And then they are going back to their parents and making their parents very active. So I think, all of us respond to our children, even if we don't respond to anyone else. And that, just speaking to the college students, as I was giving you the example of street trees, that idea was not mine. It came from an undergraduate student, and it has been our most successful way of connecting with society at large. So two things. One is educate. Second is understand how would outsiders think of nature. That we have learned through interacting with them. So some people think of nature as food. Some people think of nature as poetry and art. Some people think of trees as places to climb on and play games with. And we as ecologists, I think when we only communicate with them about birds and diversity, we lose that opportunity. So the other thing I have learned over time is to try and take off those lenses, and depending on whom I'm talking to, find their hook. And from that, bring them to biodiversity. But
Thank you,
it's a hit and miss. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Thank you.
Any more questions from audience?
I'm just typing my email address because somebody had asked how do we contact.
Okay.
Yeah, I've typed it in. You can contact me if you wish.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am, providing your email ID. Thank you, ma'am. You have nicely delivered.
Can I just add to it actually?
About
I think there's one question.
Yes, sir.
Sir, can I just add to it, the awareness part?
Please do.
Sure. In fact, what we are doing is what we learned during visits to schools and colleges for lectures is that many people want to do, as ma'am said. But what happens is there is a lack of connect in the system that we have. So what are the practical approaches? Like ma'am gave a lot of examples of what, and very well what I wanted to say. And what we are also trying to do, many people are trying to do. So point is that how to connect and have a regular connect. So a lot of festivals, fairs, and all are there, and a lot of things can be done which can show practical benefits to the not only to the environment, but also other options for livelihoods and start enterprises at the colleges level, where we have incubation. And in fact, I think many colleges in West India, South India have incubation. In fact, in Bihar also some colleges have incubation centers. So they should be able to incubate such systems which are intrinsic to our livelihood also, as well as environment and society. And then another point that I just wanted to add is that why don't we have more festivals? Festivals, like there were many festivals where animals were there, old festivals. Bihar people must be remembering Sonpur Mela. Sonpur Mela is very famous across the country, actually. One of the biggest melas where a lot of products from different places come up, and many of them were environmental products. Many animals were there, animals were exchanged, sold and all. So people enjoyed a lot. The fun is not only in malls and multiplexes, as ma'am said. The fun is actually staying with the nature. And on similar mode, actually, we started a festival which we'll request everybody to be a part of. We do it between Janmashtami and 2nd October, Gandhiji Jayanti, because we believe that Lord Krishna and Gandhiji, Lord Krishna in ancient times or in our say mythology or whatever history we say, and Gandhiji in the modern times were symbols of sustainable development goals. They took nature, they stayed with the nature and were deeply involved with the nature, be it with the cows, animals, rivers, biodiversity, serpents, hills, and all. And Gandhiji also had a Gram Swaraj concept, which was being with the nature. So he had goats and all the other animals also. And he believed in ahimsa, so non-violence. So all those things were there. So we had a sustainable development festival. We should not have only conferences, but we can have festivals where people come and enjoy and do their sustainable development activities, showcase what they have been doing since long and what are the opportunities. So we did it 2 years back at Indira Gandhi National Center. Just wanted to, we did it at Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts in Delhi, sir, and which is a place where whosoever has visited it, it's a very good, not only center for art, but biodiversity. So you'll have very, very old trees, 200, 300, 400-year-old trees and plants, and also it's a unique place to visit.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, Ajit, sir.
Also, we should have such places. Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, ma'am, for your nice lecture. You have discussed about the urban sustainability, urban restoration, eutrophication, about the global south urbanization, need to better integration of the research into planning, and as well as the importance of street trees and rewilding the city. Very nice lecture, madam. Thank you, madam.
Thank you so much.
Next speaker is Dr. Sudipto Chatterjee. Am I audible, Madam Sudipto Chatterjee?
Dr. Sudipto, Mr.
Yes.
So, are you able to see me?
Yes.
Dr. Dilip Paul, you are able to see me?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, sir.
So, thank you very much for inviting me to this beautiful conference.
Okay.
So, I'm trying to load my presentation. Give me just 30 seconds of time.
Just one minute, sir. Just about your introduction, sir.
Please.
Sir. The introduction of the Dr. Sudipto Chatterjee. You are working for conservation of forest and biodiversity since past 21 years. You have worked as biodiversity conservation and protective areas management specialist in Sikkim Biodiversity Conservation and Forest Management Project Integrated Development Division. As head Forest Conservation Program of WWF India and Biodiversity and Conservation Program of Windrock International India, you have served as team manager biodiversity in technical facilitation organization for the sustainable ecosystem, as well as the land management country partnership project at the Indian Council of Forest Research and Education, as well as you have worked as heads of the Communities and Biodiversity Division and Forest and Carbon Division of Wildlife Trust of India. You are recipient of the Whistler Associate Award UK in 2009 for conservation of rhododendrons in Eastern Himalaya. You have many peer-reviewed publications, including conservation of forest and biodiversity. Sir, your topic of today's talk is the biodiversity conservation in India in face global changes. Sure.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Paul, for introducing me. I understand that I'm speaking to an academic institution in the state of Bihar. I have not met you earlier, but thank you for inviting me. My presentation is loaded. You can see that.
Okay, sir.
You can see my presentation?
Yes, presentation. No, please share, sir.
So I decided to speak on biodiversity conservation in the face of in global changes. I'm in academics now. For a long time, I have worked with organizations like World Wildlife Fund. I have worked with the government. And since past 6 years, I have been working with a university. This is Terry School of Advanced Studies.
Sir, please share your screen.
You're not able to see the screen?
No, sir, still not.
Okay, I'll do it all over again. Matthew, can you help me with the loading the screen? Has it come up now? Has it come up now?
Yes, this is the aquatic ecosystem and management, sir.
No, it is biodiversity conservation in face of global changes.
Okay, not seen.
Okay. Now has it come up?
No, sir, still not. This one is 2021 WS4154 aquatic ecosystem and management, sir.
No, no. Just give me a minute. Has it come up now?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me into the conference. I'm in academics now at the Delhi School of Advanced Studies. We are located in Delhi, and this is my institution. Okay, here in this institution, I teach biodiversity and conservation. I teach wildlife conservation and management, aquatic biodiversity, communities and conservation. So if you happen to visit to our website, then you will get the details. I'm not taking you through these now. But the point that I would like to begin with this presentation is that India has a plan for itself. There is a technology plan for India, and there are certain sectors where we have been doing very well. We are galloping. Certain sectors we are really walking very slow. Somewhere we are trotting, and somewhere we are walking. And if we see the kind of population that we will be having by 2005, we see that 50% of our population still will be rooted and remote. And this is the kind of population left behind, 30%. So this is the kind of, with this kind of a population, we are looking at how to spread, how to intensify our knowledge on biological diversity and natural resource management. Now, as the speaker has said, and there was a question also in this regard, there is a deep need of strengthening this area of research. The kind of students that I deal with in my university is a group of students who are there to make a career after biological diversity or biodiversity. So therefore, we take them through the science of biodiversity conservation. But that is only one aspect of the coin. There is another aspect of the coin where we take the students, give them to exposure to some real life experiences from which they learn. We implement community-based projects through several funding agencies. So those are our sort of research-based activities. Today, I'm going to take you through that what makes me convince our students that why should we studying biodiversity and conservation. And the reason for that is that today's generation, today's students, it is not very easy to bring them. We have to really convince them the significance and the need for conservation of biological diversity. So when I take the students along, and to convince them that why we should be focusing on biodiversity, we talk about what is lost, what are the strong arguments for conservation of biodiversity, the recent threats like the climate change, how is climate change impacting on our biodiversity. We make them aware about why there is a tremendous effort in the global and national efforts. Why is it India puts in so much of efforts in conserving, and why it is that we get so much of global attention, and what are the new approaches to biodiversity conservation in India? Having said that, then what is the future of the biodiversity? And then why the biodiversity loss is a global change, why it is the global issue. So let me begin and let me take you through, and that has been the title of my presentation, that why biodiversity is a global change. So global change is something that when a change happens, it is very, very difficult to revert back. And we have the concept of what is it called planetary boundaries. All of us are aware of Ramayana, our story, the Lakshman putting the Lakshman Rekha. So have we crossed our Lakshman Rekha? Now, there were 23 scientists all over the world who aggregated, who joined, and then they decided for themselves, for us, that what could be the planetary boundaries, which are the threats for which we have crossed those Lakshman Rekhas. And it was just 23 brains that met at the Stockholm Environment Institute, and they found out that out of the 10 threats or so, the climate change, the biodiversity loss, the nitrogen cycle are the ones where we have crossed those planetary boundaries. And the image that you see is of the Earth, and we have put meters on this Earth, and a limited group of people trying to figure out that which are the threats where we are crossing the limits. And close on the heels to nitrogen is the phosphorus. And many of you would be knowing that at one point of a time, we have been talking about other threats like the stratospheric ozone depletion. Our oceans are getting acidified, the freshwater, global freshwater use, the land use changes, the atmospheric aerosol, and the chemical pollution. Now, the three threats where we have crossed the limit are the climate change, the biodiversity loss, and nitrogen cycle. Had it been a regular class, I would have paused over here to have a lot of discussion with you. But here, this is there's a very limited time, so I will walk you through the presentation. Now, coming to land first. Land is under tremendous stress. Now, this is an image I have taken from after coming from on the way from Arizona to New York. And if you take an image from the aircraft, you see a picture like this. Now, this is a very arid part of United States of America. Now, here you see that the pressure on the land is so much that we are not living in our arid ecosystem, because on one hand we have to conserve biological diversity, and on the other hand we have to be productive, we have to feed our teeming millions, and we have to make best use of the productivity of the land. So how do we do it? And that is where we talk about the sustainable land management. And I will take you through some parts of the world. Now, on the right-hand side of the screen, you are seeing a forest, and this is a tropical rainforest. Now, tropical rainforest. Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So this is the tropical rainforest, the kind of forest we have in southern Western Ghats, parts of at the confluence of Arunachal Pradesh and Assam, and Andaman and Nicobar Islands. But this is not a forest from India. This is a forest from Indonesia. And our forests in Andaman and Nicobar Islands is very similar to the forests of the Southeast Asian countries, Malaysia, Indonesia. And I'm giving this example for a reason. Now, what is being done to the forest? So we know that, deforestation is a threat, and we are cutting away the forest. We are logging the forest. And why we are logging the forest? Why this forest in Indonesia is getting logged? Because these forests have to be converted to plantations. And these plantations are for the oil palm. So we as a country, we are importer of oil palm. At one point of a time, I'm showing this example from Indonesia because at one point of a time, even Andaman Nicobar Island, forest of Andaman Nicobar Islands was thought about by the developmental lobby to convert them into plantation so that our cost for import of oil palm gets reduced. We are the biggest importers of oil palm. We use oil palm in medicines. We all use oil palm. Women use them for their lipsticks, their eyebrows. So it is used in many of the food products as a cooking oil. It is used in many other products. Okay. Now we have been able to save our Andaman and Nicobar forests, and instead of that, we have been importing oil, palm oil, from the Southeast Asian countries. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that knowingly and unknowingly what we do has a tremendous impact on the biological diversity. Here in India, we have saved our forest, but we are creating a threat somewhere else. And who suffers ultimately? It is the orangutans, which is the national animal of Indonesia. So whatever we do, like we are a connected world. Our problems, biodiversity conservation, loss of biological diversity is a global problem. Now, when it comes to land, so with respect to carbon dioxide, many of you might be knowing that we talk about a threshold, and that threshold is something like 400 ppm in the atmosphere. If we say that 400 ppm of carbon dioxide is there in the atmosphere, the threshold has reached. But when it comes to land, there is no zone of uncertainty. There is no threshold. We never know at what point of time our ecosystem has collapsed. We lose biodiversity, we know that. And we have been talking about that. The previous speaker emphasized a lot about and although the focus was on urban forestry, but definitely the loss is biodiversity. But what is the impact on us? What have we lost and what we lose when we lose them? If some biodiversity is gone, if some species has become extinct, how does it matter to you? We are sitting comfortably in our rooms. We are taking classes. We have met in MS Teams. But does it matter to us if a species had got lost in Africa, or for the matter in the rainforest of South America? Does it matter to us in India? Should we be considered only about what we are losing in India, or we should be talking about that what we are losing, what is the impact of losing biodiversity in the world? Okay, we have lost dodo, this bird. We have lost the passenger pigeon, gone. We have a shameful event in the human history very recently, the Thalassian tiger. It is not a tiger, but Australia lost this, and then we are losing our amphibians because a strange chytric fungus disease. The question is that should we be bothered? Should we be concerned? Because many of these species are not from India. Okay, they are not from your state of Bihar. But should we be concerned? So, and what is that we have lost? So, International Union for Conservation of Nature reports that in the last 500 years, we have lost 844 of them. Amphibians losing very fast. 122 species of amphibians are probably extinct. So, what is that happening to us? This is a dolphin, and your state, Bihar, even has a dolphin sanctuary. And I would say, as a speaker here, that getting dolphin as a national aquatic animal of India is contribution of Bihar. Because unless Science College of Patna had undertaken those intensive studies on dolphins, so we would have never been able to categorize dolphins as a state aquatic animal. Now, dolphins are not only found in India, but it is there in our neighboring countries also. But give a thought over it. Dolphins, while they survive still in India, they are extinct. I repeat the word extinct in China. Although they are extinct in China, has not been reported so far. Locally, it is called Baiji. The Chinese are not willing to accept that this is gone, okay, and it is still classified as critically endangered. So when a species become extinct, when we lose biodiversity, it means something to us. It is very much to the prestige of our country. We are on the verge of losing the great Indian bustard. In Gujarat and Maharashtra and Rajasthan, very few of them now survive. And then the name Indian is attached to the bustard. For some reason, this bird was not being able to declare as a national bird of India, but the word Indian is attached. So it hurts the countries when we have not been able to give protection to species. There are definitely reasons that why magazines like Time raise up the issue of conservation. Why this act of vanishing because it becomes a global issues. Time will not permit me to take you through each of some of these publications, which has really influenced policies. Let me proceed further. A question that I ask is that which is the only species reported to be extinct from India? It is not the cheetah, because cheetah has become extinct from India, but it still survives in African countries. And there is a effort to bring the cheetahs back to India. The species that is reported to be extinct from India is the pink-headed duck. Look for it in the Google and you will find an Indian stamp dedicated to this species. So let me take you to Canada. This is the conference hall of Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD, okay? And on the seat, you find the chair, Madam Bosnia-Herzegovina. And the speaker that you see over here is a professor. He is the director of Harvard Medical School. The question is, what is the professor of a Harvard Medical School speaking in a biodiversity conference? A medical practitioner talking about biodiversity? Now, he is Professor Eric Shivian. He is a Nobel laureate. And he has authored a book called Sustaining Life. If there are many students who are listening to me in this presentation, now I'll strongly encourage you to read this book, what a doctor writes about biological diversity. And he has on his cover page of his book, he has shown a frog. Now, when he finishes his talk, this man gets a standing ovation and applause, which possibly lasted more than the applause he got while winning the Nobel Prize. And I will take you through this research. This is the book, and this is about the frog that he has researched on. Now, this frog is found in the rainforests of Australia and New Zealand. Look carefully. In the mouth of the frog, there is a tadpole, and this frog has ingested this tadpole. Now, the curiosity to the medical world is that how is that this frog it ingested tadpole and vomits it back? Because in the gastrointestinal system, what we have is the acids. The acid should have killed this tadpole. Now, this particular doctor was looking at medicines for peptic ulcer. Now, the doctor laments, the Nobel laureate laments that he will never be able to research again because this species has become extinct. The knowledge that this frog could have provided us on treatment for our own medical problem is lost forever. There are numerous examples from amphibians, from bears, from non-human primates, from trees, medicinal plants, cycads, ginkgo biloba, cone snails, sharks, and horseshoe crabs. I mean, you can go through them, the kind of contribution biodiversity makes to the understanding of the human requirement of biodiversity. And we are deeply, deeply indebted to them. So frogs are getting certainly extinct. And what will we lose if we lose them? Look at the bears. Okay. Now, in the states of Chhattisgarh, even at one time in Bihar, in Madhya Pradesh, in Maharashtra, at least I'm from Bihar, and even I have experiences of the Madari Nach. Okay, so where Madaris would make the bears dance. Bears would not dance to entertain you. Bears would dance because the Madaris would make them dance because the rope is passed through the nostrils, and when the rope is pulled, they scream in pain. So now bear is a scheduled species. It is in Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. So we have taken up the bears and we have put them onto the rescue centers. Now, the point over here is that possibly we have been able to save the bears by creating some national parks and sanctuaries. We are trying to protect them. Now, look at what happens in Southeast Asia. They take the bear bile from the bears and then it is used in Unani system of medicine. What happens if the bear goes? Maybe some of you might be knowing, maybe some of you might not be knowing that bears never suffer from diseases like osteoporosis. They never suffer from diabetes 1 and diabetes 2. Our country has practically become a hotspot of diabetes. All right, bears never suffer from diabetes. The knowledge lies there. Biodiversity has a lot to contribute. The black bears keep their blood glucose levels normal despite of not having enough circulation of insulin. Okay, and this is what we do to the bears. I have worked with a bear conservation program. The bear cubs are stolen from the forest of Orissa, and then the Madaris would rear them up, and the Madaris would make livelihood. Okay, it is not possible now. So that is why possibly the reason that you are not able to see much of Madari Nach now, but it still happens. I have heard that it happens in Nepal, and this is what is done in Southeast Asia, where bear bile is taken. Let me take you to the western part of Asia, to Afghanistan and Pakistan, where you see that it is fun, it is entertainment. The bears are made to fight with the dogs. It is called bear baiting, and it still happens. Okay, another category of bears, if you have heard of Dr. Al Gore, who was supposed to become the president of United States of America, he writes in his book The Earth in Balance, and he does a very beautiful film also called The Inconvenient Truth, that the polar bears are the ones that will become extinct because of human causes, because the ice in Antarctica is melting very, 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 very fast. Okay, now look at that. What biodiversity contributes? Chimpanzees, right? Chimpanzees are closest to us. Look at the screen. Look at the chromosomes. Many of you who are from the science of biology so might have learned about the chromosomes. If you look at very carefully the chromosomal structure of chimpanzees and humans, look at the similarity that we have. They are the closest. They are our relatives. It is only because of the fusion of the chromosomes at 2A and 2B, so we humans evolved. So therefore, we have a moral responsibility, okay, to other life forms. It is their planets too. We should be very much thankful to the rhesus macaques, because whatever investigation and research is being done, all the cosmetics that possibly you use is tested on them. And we really don't care about that, because they are of least concern. Sometimes they are trouble to us also, but we should not forget their contribution. Similarly, we should not forget that immense amount of biological diversity we have in nature. On the center of the screen, you have the Taxus baccata variety Wallichiana, which was at one point of a time, which was collected heavily from state of Arunachal Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, practically got wiped out until the time silvicultural protocols were developed for this. Why? Because the pharmaceuticals, the pharmacy research needed the species for the treatment of ovarian and breast cancer. There must be many, many examples, my dear participants. I am speaking only a few. Whatever little experience I have got in my lifetime by working in different conservation organizations and presently as a faculty at Terry School of Advanced Studies. We really understand a very little of biological diversity of our marine world because we don't see them because everything is underwater. The cones, they have a tremendous contribution. The peptides, the painkillers comes from these cones. Sharks. So a lot of our understanding of our blood plasma. So that comes from our shark. And what do? So shark fin until the recent past has been used to be exploited in the coast of Gujarat and in many parts of the world, even Japan, they are still engaged in whaling. Many of you might not be knowing that shark cartilages contain substances that anti-angiogenic activity. That is the ability to prevent the growth of new blood cells. Possibly the treatment of cancer lies in these species. We have to research more. The salt gland of spiny dogfish has been the prime model for understanding how the salt regulating system works. So tremendous amount of contribution biodiversity has to our knowledge. Horseshoe crabs, it is a living fossil, but still traded. And this is very interesting because horseshoe crabs, they have been able to evade the past 5 extinction process that the world has faced. I'm going a bit fast, I know, but that is a limitation. We have reached a time of the 6th extinction, and the 6th extinction is because of human beings. All we know about our eyes, all the initial research comes from this, and then the blue blood of this limulus, the crab, is under a lot of research. And this is an image from a research laboratory in mining in United States. Possibly this species holds the clue to the treatment of the gram-negative meningitis. And as I mentioned earlier, the eye of the limulus has been a model to investigate the human eye. There are reasons, my dear participants, that many of the foreigners have come to our country to investigate our biological diversity. We call them the biogeographers. We call them the plant hunters. There are many of them, but then let me mention to you about only one. That is Sir John Dalton Hooker, who traveled to Sikkim. And he entered Sikkim through Bihar. And then look at this image over here. This is a painting that the lecture and the Bhutia committee has commemorated his presence for his discoveries of rhododendrons. It is not without reason the Europeans and the other plant hunters have come. And if you look at the history a bit, you will find that many of these people have been medical practitioners. And they have been working in the military, in the army, and they have been looking for medicines. Okay, extinction. It is not that it is only human beings are doing it. We are only responsible. It has happened in the past also. The reality is that there has been extinctions 5 times in the past. Now, but then if you read a book called The 6th Extinction by Elizabeth Colbert, the pace of extinction, you will look at the graph, is much higher after the Industrial Revolution. We have become the cost. In fact, in the earlier extinctions, 95% of the biodiversity got exterminated. But now, we human beings, if someone looks at us from the space, we are like a cancer to all living beings. Who has given the right to take over the control? Okay, all the history of fossils. Where do we know all this? So therefore, we rely on the fossils. We study. We talk about some of the elements of biodiversity that disappeared in the past. You all are aware of dinosaurs, what was the kind of environment we had at the time. Now here I would like to mention that this earth is a beautiful system. For a long, long time, have you ever wondered that why the level of oxygen is constant on our Earth's atmosphere? It stays very stable at 20 to 21%. And oxygen is toxic. When dinosaurs survived, the level of oxygen was much, much higher. And this is the reason that we have to study biodiversity much more intensely. Not only we have to study the present, we have to go back to the past and study. Extinctions have happened. There are numerous examples. You find the aconites, the tribolites. Time will not permit me to take you through the details. There are many things for which we will never get the answers. Let me take you through only one, the aconites. Now this species had got 7 chambers, whereas it utilized only 2. The rest of the 5 chambers in this was being vacuumed. Why were they 5 vacuumed? Even geologists have not been able to find the answers to them. Extinctions are happening even now. The bulldog rat got exterminated in 1903. Thalassian tiger, a shameful event in the history. So this has become extinct. And now when we have lost them, we are talking about that should we get them back in the class? Should we get them back in the country? Why so? So I would like you to think over. This is not a classroom where we cannot go into a debate, but think that why the Americans are spending millions and millions of dollars to bring back the mammoth, which became extinct in the Ice Age. Very similar, in India, there has been a concerted effort to bring back cheetah back to our Indian forest. There has been a lot of debate going on, should we or should we not? Should we protect our lions or not? And eminent historians in some of our eminent universities has been discussing that should we invest so much in protecting our lions, which is just 250 or 300 number in one corner of the country, in the Gir National Park in Gujarat. Are they native to us? Why should we preserve a species, spend money on a species that was possibly brought back to India by the Maharajas of Junagadh? So these are the issues that needs to be looked at. Some of you might favor, some of you might say that cheetahs should be brought back to India because we were responsible for extermination of cheetah. Some of you might feel that no, we should not bring it back because it may create a new set of problems. Biodiversity is not a very easy thing to handle. It leads to a lot of human-wildlife conflicts. But in spite of that, in spite of all the threats to biological diversity, it is really very encouraging that newer species are getting discovered in India. One example are the frogs. Professor Biju Patnaik from University of Delhi, Department of Zoology, consistently he's coming out papers with new species. So therefore, I would like to ask the participants that what are the strong arguments for conservation of biological diversity? We should be conserving only the bigwigs, like the tiger, because we believe that if we preserve the tiger, it is at the apex of the food chain. Everything should be well protected. Or should we neglect species like insects, which are least concerned, which are plenty, tremendous. They have an ecosystem, they have a role in pollination in ecosystem. They are providing us with an ecosystem service, but we still don't know that why nature has been so benevolent with the beetles, okay? And or should we also focus on unknown species? Many of the mollusks, cones, we don't even know. Or should we preserve some of our very pristine species, elements of biological diversity, which are of evolutionary significance? If you have traveled through Himalayas, if you have traveled through Eastern Himalaya in particular, you will find this beautiful white flower called magnolia. If you happen to be a student of botany, you will know that these flowers are of evolutionary significance. They are somewhere between the higher plants which we call them as angiosperms, and between the lower category, less evolved gymnosperms. So should we preserve them because they are of evolutionary significance? But unfortunately, in our country, much of the collection lies in botanical gardens outside the country. We need to respect and preserve and develop more knowledge, develop deeper understanding on species that we have. Okay. A strong argument for biodiversity is also power, because many of us, when we were children, and even now, we have heard of a kingdom called Vijayanagara, Raja Krishna Deva Raya. He had a wonderful minister called Tenali Rama, on which there is a television serial also. We have read comics about this. And when we talk about big empires in India, we talk about the Mughal Empire. We had also an empire called Vijayanagara, ruled by Raja Krishna Deva Raya. And why was he so powerful? He was so powerful because he maintained a very strong army. And why was his army very strong? His army was very strong because he could purchase, he could trade for Arabian horses. And where did the money come from? Now we know that our Western Ghats, southern part of the country, is rich in spices, diversity of spices. So he would trade the horses for spices. So therefore, biodiversity is also power. How much we know about biodiversity. Now this is one exercise I do in class, and I give the students a burger to eat and come out with what are the elements of biodiversity. So they talk about wheat, they talk about cabbage, they talk about onion, they talk about spices, they talk about pepper, they talk about some more elements that goes into biological diversity. But often I have found that when I ask them to list the number of species, they usually forget the yeast. Now, when talking about biological diversity, we should not forget the microorganisms as well. It's time that we understand the role of the microorganisms that they play in functioning of our ecosystem. This is not a classroom. Otherwise, I would have taken you to the history of wheat. Do you know that it took 10,000 years to domesticate wheat? Wild variety of wheat is deployed in nature, and what we eat is hexaploid, and it took breeders 10,000 years. Now we need to preserve these wild varieties because they have the genes, and wild varieties of crops generally do not survive in artificial conditions. Therefore, we need to protect our forests where these wild varieties survive. I was talking about microorganisms. It was an orange peel that was thrown away, and then the penicillin, the first antibiotic, came out of penicillin from the garbage of Professor Alexander Fleming. Now the question is that we have been studying. Okay, we are aware, and we were talking more about awareness. I don't believe that much of our population is not aware. They are sensitized also. But the main question is that in spite of all that awareness, all that science festivals that we are talking about, our villagers, our local communities, they definitely understand what the significance of biodiversity. I get to travel. I prepare a lot of biodiversity registers in villages along with my students. And let me share with you what I understand is that in fact, our local people, our local communities, our villagers, they understand more biodiversity than us, than we academicians. The only difference is that they are not able to communicate the we do. Okay, that they are not able to write papers like we do, but the kind of knowledge they hold. So we need to retain that knowledge. And the question is that why do we resort to such unsustainable practices? Let me take you to my project site in Kerala. Now, this is a Kani tribal community. At one point of a time, they became very famous for a medicinal plant called Arogya Pacha, Trichopus zelanicus. I will not be able to take you to that interesting story, but this man is not hunting. He's not hunting any bigger fauna, although he has a bow and arrow in his hand. You'll be surprised to know that he's fishing. Such is the accuracy that he is able to take one fish that he requires for his lunch. And this is what from my one more project site at the confluence of Assam and Nagaland. So here you see a Karbi. This is at the Karbi Anglong region of Assam. Now here we have a community member who has come with, look at the fishing gear that he has. He would put electrical currents in water. The fishes will dazzle up, and then he can have a good catch. Now on one hand we have sustainability, on the right hand we have greed. When we talk about biodiversity, often we forget, like microorganisms, the smaller elements. We talk about forest, but when we talk about a canopy, there are so many of them that survives on forest. Lichens, beautiful species. They have a role to play in ecosystem functioning. At TERI SS, we are researching on these species. They are colonizers. And what do we do to them? So if you go to Uttarakhand, you will see that local communities with very crude instruments, so they cut away the beautiful forest. Why do? Because they come from Uttarakhand, they come to places like Kannauj, where itr is made, and that itr is transported to the Arabian countries. Why? Because our brethren in Arabian countries, they would require that itr, there is scarcity of water. So therefore, they would like to feel good. Before going for the namaz, they would like to spray themselves. So sometimes we have to understand the entire chain of events. Smaller species coming from Uttarakhand, getting produced in Uttar Pradesh, getting exported to Saudi Arabia, to London, and this is an image of a itr getting made in the city of Kannauj. And then, I mean, we are so secretive about our traditional knowledge. It took me 3 years to reach this community, to see how this product henna itr is made and then marketed. The thing is that we communities, we understand, and we put pressures on our ecosystems, and we are on the verge of collapse. At any point of a time, you read this beautiful author, Jared Diamond, who writes that why, even being educated, even in the cities, we act so stupid, and we do a collapse of our ecosystem. Such is the collapse that our planet indexes. On one hand, on the right hand side, you are showing the built up in conversion of land from forest land to agricultural land. We need more and more land for productivity. We are raising our curve for carbon dioxide, but all the other species, the marine, the freshwater, the vertebrates, so there it is coming down. So on one hand, we are enhancing our ecological footprint, and on the other hand, we are on the decimation of biological diversity. We are on the biodiversity hotspot. We are one among the 10 megadiversity countries. We have delineated biodiversity hotspots. We are Center for Plant Diversity identified by IUCN. We have World Heritage Sites. We have Ramsar sites, wetlands of global conservation significance. Okay, and how do we respond? So we categorize, and unless someone from outside, in this case, Professor Norman Myers from Conservation International, when he designates some 35 biodiversity hotspots areas in the world, then these areas start getting international attention and possibly the funding support that it needs for undertaking biodiversity exercises. Okay, so conservation, biodiversity, one thing we should appreciate and understand is that do not follow political boundaries. We need to work not only with communities in our country, we have to also work with our neighboring countries also, because sometimes we share the biodiversity with them. We have to work very close with our neighboring countries like Nepal. We have to work very closely with our neighboring countries like Bangladesh. We share Sundarban. We share Sundarban with them. We need those biological corridors. And not only in terms of wild biodiversity, we have beautiful agri-biodiversity. Although Vavilov never came to India, but then number 7 over here is the Hindustan Center of Biological Diversity. In event of a fungal attack in our rice germplasm, it was one wild variety of rice from the state of Chhattisgarh that saved us. The kind of diversity we have for our bhindi, for our okra, for the lady's finger, the brinjal, the cucurbits, the variety we have in terms of oranges. But thankfully, we have started recognizing the biodiversity significance, the agrodiversity significance we have. And now it is not only the wild animals, we have started respecting the floral wealth that we have. Tura in Meghalaya is the center of origin of the oranges. So Citrus indicus indicates that the origin is in India, and Tura in Meghalaya has been declared as a wildlife sanctuary. We are very fortunate that migratory species come to us. The olive ridley turtles come to us to lay their eggs, and the hatchlings, they again go back. Year after year, they come back. But we have not been so much lucky with respect to the Siberian cranes. The last pair of Siberian cranes was possibly observed in the year 2001. The flock still exists, but our understanding is very limited. We still don't understand that why the Siberian cranes, one flock still comes to China, but the other flock has stopped coming to India at all. Black-necked cranes. So these come to Ladakh. I see, if I'm overshooting time, please let me know, I'll stop over there. Okay. There is only one person in the country who has been authorized by the government to bring olive ridley damaged and hurt olive ridley turtles to our home, nurse them, and then release back to the nature. Now, these are the kind of conservation efforts we are engaged in. So we have a rescue and rehabilitation center, and this is near the Kaziranga National Park in Assam. We need to care our biological diversity and take decisions like, will bringing back the cheetah is in the right direction. Climate change and biodiversity. Formerly, we had people like Professor Salim Ali, Dr. Salim Ali from BNHS, who had made copious records of the past. And that is how we know that climate change is happening and we need newer habitats. Our species are moving to those areas which are suitable to them. We need to understand the phenology. Many things are happening in the forest. Our rhododendrons are flowering much earlier because of climate change. We do have a very strong set of legislations. I'm not going through each of these, but as a country, as far as legislation is concerned, I think we have done our job. We have a network of protected areas. And now we are coming to newer approaches of biodiversity conservation. We are bringing finances like RED+. There has been support like programs like USAID in India. We have introduced forest certification to complement our efforts, suggesting that we are able to manage our forests through sustainable means. We have World Heritage programs. Kanchenjunga National Park, one of the World Heritage sites discovered by UNESCO, and then we become a part of the world. So there are many forms of global prioritizations. Okay, let me not take you through all these in details. A lot of challenges remain to us, sustainably managing our land, addressing desertification, developing indicators to biodiversity, developing standards for species because we need them for our livelihood as well, and we need to manage our protected areas. We know very little about our aquatic species. One problem shifts on to the other. The Madaris have switched on to other species to make their livelihood. We understand very little of the life tree that we have. Our understanding is limited to only to that small circle that is indicated. We do not understand much of the microbial world. So this is my university, and this is how we prepare our students to work in biodiversity conservation. In our case, we are we focus more on the science of biodiversity conservation. We do not spare them for coming to very inhospitable habitats. We encourage them to talk about and learn about the lesser elements of biodiversity. One of our field stations, our partnership with the Madras Crocodile Bank, the Angumbe Rainforest Research, we take restoration of degraded landscapes projects with our students. We take our students to villages where students learn about the biodiversity registers from local communities. We talk at very high level. Very recently, the Prime Minister, the state environment ministers of other countries has been to our institutions. We work also on different conventions, okay, and we work for land degradation neutrality. We also work for the new policy environment that comes, the latest draft policy from Government of India. So we try to strengthen the policy environment in the country. I would conclude here saying that it is a long bridge. It is not that it is not connected. The science, policy, awareness, we understand, but the bridge is weak. We need to strengthen them. And to strengthen our taxonomic knowledge and inventory, to help evidence-based policy making, we need deeper understanding of our ecosystem, our species, our genetic diversity. So only then we will be able to bridge the knowledge of science of biodiversity and conservation. So thank you very much. I would like to end here. Deliberately, I would like to leave some room for some of the questions that you may so have.
Thank you so much, sir, for your very informative and wonderful talk. We now invite our participant to put their question before him. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions from the participants?
It seems there is no question, sir.
Okay.
Any question? There is no question, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us and uh, giving a wonderful talk. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
We now move on for lunch break, and after lunch break at 2:20 p.m. We need to join for this deliberation. Thank you all of you. Thank you all.
वहाँ फिर रिकॉर्डिंग में लगा इसको अब नीचे एरिया में आपको खाना दे लो
है